Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for February 20th through 26th, 2023. So here we are again, week in and week out. We look at the astrology, something that you hear me say over and over again. It's worth saying over and over again. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. So how do we show up during this time? And maybe there's some hard astrology, or maybe this, it's a new moon today. What do we do with that new moon? That part is on us, but new moons mean new beginnings by their nature. But this is also a new moon that's giving us a preview, setting the stage, giving us notes for Saturn's arrival in Pisces next month. Actually, I was just looking at it. It's probably like in a couple of weeks by now. It's kind of crazy to think here we are at the end of Saturn in Aquarius. Yes, we're going to talk a little bit about Saturn, one of my favorite planets, maybe yours at this point. Maybe you're like, no, I don't like Saturn, Katie. But if you're watching live, always say hello. Let me know where you're watching from, even if you're not watching live, because I know some of you don't just watch it on Facebook, you watch on Spotify, Instagram, YouTube. So yeah, we've got some things to cover. It's a quiet week, although I sometimes feel like when I say it's a quiet week, it's anything but a quiet week. But the major headline is the Pisces new moon that we're having today, February 20th, and how this is both a time of renewal and new beginning. This is what a new moon does, but it's also bringing us to the end of the astrological year. And when we reach the end of the zodiac, and you have to understand that the zodiac, whether it is a day, a moment, a year, or the entirety of your life, every zodiac sign is a step. There's like this sacred path that takes us through each of the 12 signs. So in a way, we've been walking that path, even though I haven't always pointed it out, and each sign builds upon one another. And when we get to Aquarius, and I realize, we've just said goodbye to Aquarius season, but Aquarius, we sort of now at the pinnacle of our world, everything that we can see and touch and know. It's a very systems-based sign, a very analytical sign. It's a very worldly sign in some cases, but Aquarius is not the last zodiac sign. It's Pisces. And so this reminder, and maybe not so subtle reminder, especially as we get ready for Saturn in Pisces, that there is a world beyond this world, and that the last element in astrology isn't air. Your air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. The last element is water. And water energy is meant to be the bridge between this world and the next world, this life and the next life. And we need that water energy to form memory and emotional bonds and connection, but also to transport us and also to transmit. And whether we are transmitting our lives, accounting for our lives and the things that we've done, transmitting our wisdom and knowledge. This is, as we get to Pisces, and really leaving a legacy. It's another word we don't always think about with Pisces. Sometimes we think about that with Scorpio, but Scorpio is more the financial legacy of things. But Pisces, it's your emotional and spiritual legacy, so to speak. So yeah, we've got a lot of Pisces things to talk about here on this new moon. Venus goes into Aries this week. That's the other thing that's sort of going on. We have a couple other aspects, and we're also, like I said, we're getting ready for Saturn's arrival in Pisces on March 7th. So just to say it again, my name is Katie Sweetman, for those that don't know, and every week we gather live, and I'm an astrologer. I'm also a psychic medium, and I'm here in the New York City area. So yes, I see some familiar faces in the live chat, and even if you are not watching live, I know some of you say, Katie, I feel like I know you. Some of you are my clients. We work one-on-one. Some of you all I see here week in and week out. But anyway, let's look at this week as we sort of straddle the divide between one astrological year and the other, and prepare to step out of one chapter of our lives and go into another. And one of the things, just to sort of go back to last week, because I was talking about that Sun-Saturn conjunction. Some of you are like, nothing happened, Katie. What are you talking about? I really felt that Sun-Saturn conjunction. I saw it pop up in unexpected ways. I don't know, maybe some of this is a little personal, but, for me, I'm a Scorpio, a Sagittarius rising, for those that don't know. I saw how Saturn was giving me a promotion. So some other things that I work on in my life, I was getting more duties and responsibilities. That was the Sun-Saturn conjunction for me. I was like, oh, there you go. Saturn's giving me a pat on the back. Thank you, Saturn. Glad it's not something else. Saturn's been going through my third house of voice and communication. That's where the responsibilities were manifesting. And I also see around money and the material matters, how Saturn is wrapping up its time in my second house. And, it's hard out there. And maybe some of you remember, like, I quit my job in 2019, my IT job, my full-time career, to do this full-time. So, and it was some other conversations I was having with clients who are contemplating similar leaps or have made similar leaps. And I get it. I've been there. It's scary. But sometimes, and this is where Saturn reminds us that, it's not just about money, and maybe this is Saturn Pisces speaking. It's not just about money. It's not just about our worldly things. It's about really doing what you came here to do. And how that Sun-Saturn conjunction sort of got me thinking about, okay, what's the next step? And even when I wrote the content that I wrote last Friday, I was like, I'm a Scorpio. Where is home? Who is home? That's been the major drive of the astrology for Scorpio and Scorpio rising. Where is home and who is home? And here's the Sun-Saturn conjunction last week. I was like, I don't know. It's like, do I go back to New York? Do I stay in New Jersey? Do I go someplace else? As some of you know, my father is sick. So there's all these like things that are up in the air. And will things magically not be up in the air come March? I don't know. Got some really interesting astrology going on. As Saturn's not quite at 29 Aquarius, but Pluto is at 29 Capricorn. And I think that's a lot of the heaviness. As a couple of people asked about some of the heaviness that we were having last week. And I think it was like this sort of perfect storm, so to speak, of Pluto at 29 Capricorn. I'll come back to that point in a moment. Sun-Saturn conjunction. Dark of the moon. We were this past weekend. We had the dark of the moon, which is sort of, we get to the end of something. That's the thing about the dark of the moon. It's the end of the lunar cycle. It's about things endings. And I realize ending is not the word that everybody wants to hear in their astrology, but that's sort of this time that we're in. Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. It is an ending. 29 degrees of any sign is the end of the sign. It's the ending of Pluto's time in Capricorn that started way back in January of 2008. We are starting to see, whether it's obvious or not, the conclusion of something that began way back in 2008. And Pluto, and I said this, I think, on Instagram in one of my stories, like Pluto, it hasn't been at 29 degrees of Capricorn since 1780. Long time ago. That's because Pluto has such a long orbit. So when it goes into a new sign, like it did in 2008, and like it will on March 23rd, so just next month, a month from now, it's the start of a new hour. Although in this case, Pluto will go back and forth, and we have to get all the way to November of 2024 before Pluto is fully into Aquarius. That's a whole other topic for another time, getting ready for Pluto and Aquarius. We got to focus on Saturn. We had Venus was at 29 Pisces. We had, like I said, Saturn's coming up to the end of its time in Aquarius. The moon made its last conjunction to Saturn for the next 30 years. So there's sort of this sense of like things are coming to an end. And I think sometimes when we get to these endings, there's a lot of anxiety. It's like, where am I going? Who am I going? Up or down, left or right, yes or no? And maybe, and I hope, some of the answers become more clear. Saturn is typically a pretty razor sharp sign. It's Pisces, it's not so razor sharp. And I think that as we go through Pisces season, as we come off of this Pisces new moon today, it is about trying to search for meaning because Aquarius, or the air signs, they're very analytical. It's about things adding up, things making sense on paper. In Pisces, things aren't going to make sense on paper. And I actually shared a short clip of the webinar that I did on Saturn and Pisces last week. It's a 3-hour webinar, a lot of good stuff in it. And in that clip, I talk about peace, and I'm not saying I have the answers, but this idea that Saturn in Pisces, how do we start to find peace, and peace with the things that on paper, Aquarius, analytically, Aquarius, we shouldn't be okay with. And that's hard. That's a higher spiritual bar. We have to find that within us. And I realize, Saturn in Pisces is going to be higher bars for us. And these are going to be emotional, spiritual, esoteric, existential. And I think that we're going to start to really feel into this existential material that as we go through Pisces season. And Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter, it's a different planet than Saturn. Saturn really wants to concretize things and make things real. Jupiter is a little bit more philosophical. It's like a little bit more optimistic. It's like, where are we going? Like, let's go for the adventure. Jupiter is a planet that's trying to open up our eyes to the world and to get us to see things. That we could live our lives just in a small little space that we were born, never leave, never see the world, never really see what's out there, and to learn about things. And I think Jupiter gives us that thirst for knowledge and thirst for adventure and a need to make meaning. And here we are in Pisces season, and the meaning comes from within. Like I said, Pisces is a water sign. It doesn't come from outside of us. Jupiter ruled Sagittarius, which is the other sign that Jupiter rules. So it's a very internal month for each and every one of us. And it's also a check-in on Neptune's time in Pisces. It's been in Pisces for the last 10 years, and it's a very quiet influence. Neptune doesn't always make itself very known. It sort of works in the space in between. But wherever Neptune is, that area of our life, and in this case collectively, is a spiritual work. So we've been doing our work on the Pisces archetype over the last 10 years. What is truth? What is meaning? Deeper existential questions. Everybody seems to be having these sort of spiritual awakenings, but also spiritual longings, or maybe people that don't know what to do with their feelings. There's a lot of numbing out in some ways, but these are all Pisces themes that we're going to be navigating over the next couple of years. But in the meantime, Saturn is wrapping up its time in Aquarius, and we'll talk more about this next week and even the week after as we get ready for Saturn and Pisces. But I think it's really worthwhile reflecting on what Saturn has been teaching you, and maybe in obvious ways or not so obvious ways, over the last few years. Because wherever Saturn is right now, that's the thing about Saturn, we can't relive the time. Although astrology is a circle, so we have the benefit of being able to come back to something, but we cannot relive the time. Once it's lived, it's lived. It's one of the sort of the harder lessons about Saturn. But whether you are like me, a Sagittarius rising, and Saturn is wrapping up its time in the third, about voice and communication and being the authority of what you have to say, but also having to stand behind it and really, account for what you have to say. Or Saturn going through the second about money and income and really knowing your value and worth and being able to create a stable material life, hopefully, should we be so lucky, for ourselves. And where are these deeper themes manifesting, whether it's relationship, whether it's career, for example. And this is, the link is in the show notes. You can go to, I have an article called Saturn in Aquarius, sign by sign, where you can get a refresh on what that area of your life is. I also think I talked about this last week. If I didn't, it was the week before, I can't remember. But it's worth going back and reflecting. And again, to use Pisces season, but also the energies of today's Pisces new moon to really set us up and to get us ready for this time shift that we're all going to be experiencing starting the 7th of March. And this time shift is going to be a new chapter, one where we have to build. Saturn is to build with the energies of Pisces, which is a little bit of a contrast because Pisces is the non-physical, it's the non-manifested. Hopefully these words make sense, meaning it's not about the physical world that we can touch. It's emotional, it's spiritual. So we're building something that we can't touch. We can only sense, we can only feel. You can only feel intuitively. So we have to get out of the analytical and rational mind, not completely, not to lose it completely, but to find the balance between the mind and the heart, or the mind and the soul, for example. So we're having this sort of setup for the next few weeks. So maybe this is a good segue. I'll quickly mention, yes, you can still get the Saturn and Pisces webinar. The link is in the show notes. It's on my website, empoweringastrology.com. I think there's a lot of good information in it, especially if you're going into your first Saturn return. These are my 28, 29, probably not 29 because you would still have Saturn Aquarius, but those that were born in 94, 95, and 96, like this is for you. For those that were born in 64, 65, 66, this is also for you. You're having your second Saturn return. And even if you're not in your Saturn return, Saturn, let me nerd out for a moment. You know how I love Saturn. Saturn's amazing. If you go back to these key points in your life, you start to see the theme. For example, age 14, 15, and 16 are Saturn ages. It's what's called the Saturn opposition. This is typically the first Saturn opposition that we have. Should we be so lucky, we have the second Saturn opposition of the mid-40s. Maybe, I don't think you'd have to be much, much older for that to get into the third Saturn opposition. So typically we don't live that long. However, I was reflecting back, 1993, it could have been the end of 92, 93. I got my first computer. I'm really dating myself. I was like a freshman in high school. And my dad of all people, he put astrology software. I say of all people because he's an engineer. He's like a West Point grad engineer. Not the type you would think is putting astrology software on the computer, but it was DOS. And so there's astrology software on the computer. Like, what is this? And that is where I saw my first astrology chart. I saw my own, but it's in black and white and DOS. And this was before the internet. So you couldn't just like Google, what does this mean? You had to go to the library, like in the old fashioned days. And there's a couple of astrology books in the house from the 1960s. My dad, not the best person to teach me how to do things. But I long story short, like that's I had my Saturn return of being an astrologer, or being into astrology, when Saturn was in Aquarius, because Saturn was in Aquarius when I first, stepped into my own astrology. But I'm pretty sure it was 94, it could have been 95, when I read for the first time Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. And I read that book at 14, maybe 15, and I'm like, I want to do this. Not quite astrology, but here we are 30 years later. And I'm not that I'm regressing people, but that sense of looking at the soul, looking at the birth chart, what's called the natal chart, your exact birth time. So I can see the soul, and I can see the soul's journey, and I can use my psychic mediumship. It is a great book. And I can use my psychic mediumship to get to the level of the soul. So it's not just telling me about when things are going to happen. It's like why and how you can be a participant and how things are happening. And so I see the roots. It's so crazy. I see the roots of the work that I do now when I was 14 in high school, reading astrology and occult books and past life regression. I was like going to teach myself how to do past life regression at 15 because I'm a total nerd. But anyway, not your average child. And here we are, whether it's my first Saturn return in 2008 when I was like, I want to be an astrologer. I remember the moment when I said that. I was like, I want to be an astrologer. And here we are. And it took 7-8 years, Saturn has these 7-year cycles when I did quit my job to do this full time. So it's just, like time's funny. And if you can follow Saturn in your own astrology and start to see the markers and the pillars that get put down, and you're like, wow, it's not so random. You know what I mean? Like that's as crazy as our life is, or as crazy as this world is, and as much as Saturn gets knocked in astrology, does talk about what are you growing up to become. So this is why I get on my soapbox about Saturn, because I see it and I want you all to see it. And this is why I say go back and look at the last few years, because there's something powerful for you to discover in the last few years. What is that truth? What is that wisdom? What is that knowledge? What is it that decision or that marker? Maybe you read a book that, now you can look back maybe 10 years from now. You're like, oh wow, I read that book. It changed my life. But here we are. Anyway, like I said, I got a little bit on my Saturn soapbox for a moment. Did a, since I'm talking about webinars, it turned out really well. I did a webinar back in, I think it was this past summer, winter for those in the Southern Hemisphere. I think it was in July. It's called Facing Saturn. And also a really good webinar to kind of give you that big picture overview. And I know some of you, I know that you watch. We also did my Saturn masterclass. So yeah, I'm thinking about the things I achieved while Saturn was in Aquarius, and I did some teaching modules, which I'm going to continue to work and to build on that. I did my first masterclass, do these webinars. So yeah, this is my way of accounting to Saturn, which I guess you all are Saturn today for me. And it's like, this is what I did with my time over the last few years. So just to kind of give you a little bit of pointers for you to reflect on. So yeah, Saturn nerd. Yes, we're all Saturn nerds. Anyway, let's look at the astrology of this week, February 20th through 26th, 2023. Today, as I speak to you all, it's a Pisces new moon. So this Pisces new moon falls at 1 degree, so near the very beginning of the sign. And it's sort of bringing us into the energies of new beginnings, but at the same time, it's bringing us into the energies of Pisces, which is the energies of endings. See how we have a little bit of a tension. And so how do we resolve this tension? Well, we resolve this tension by knowing that as we start to come to the end of the zodiac, we need to start to wrap things up. We need to start to prepare. We need to start to reflect and getting into these deeper existential questions. The new beginning comes where we feel that renewal of energy to take action, to start something new. And this means maybe to do something spiritual. Make sure that ritual and craft and meditation and taking care of your spiritual and emotional life is just as important as taking care of your physical health and your physical wellness, because they are all connected. This Pisces new moon in 2 weeks, we will have a Virgo full moon. Pisces and Virgo are what are called the helping and healing signs. We need Virgo, and I kind of get off on a tangent for a moment, because Pisces is so ethereal. It's not physical. It's the last sign. It's like that last breath of life. It's the water evaporating into air. It's that space between your breath. It's like you're starting to fall asleep and you feel like you're in another world. That's that very kind of in-between space. And that Pisces is showing us and revealing to us. So how do we start something or take action or really use this energy of renewal to connect more to that space? Peace, forgiveness, compassion, understanding. These are high bars for Pisces. Of course, every sign in the zodiac has a shadow side. So the shadow side of Pisces is loss. It's confusion. It's feeling like there is no point. It's hopelessness. It's addiction. It's suffering. I realize those are pretty intense words. Pisces is the two fishes going in two different directions. That said, we have this Pisces new moon. This sets up a lunar month that takes us into the next 4 weeks. This lunar month also, the Pisces new moon picks up on the energies of Jupiter and Aries. So Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. And so we have this sort of push-pull of like endings and new beginnings, because if Pisces is the omega, Aries is the alpha, it's the new beginning, it's the first breath of life, in contrast to Pisces' last breath of life. So we may feel like we are sort of moving forward, but at the same time wrapping up in two different worlds. And there is some tension to be said about that. I think this coming 4 weeks is actually going to be quite emotional. Jupiter is making something called conjunction to Chiron. And I think we're a lot of emotional materials coming up. And I think, especially after the last few years that we've had, maybe even big existential questions are coming up. What does it all mean? Why do I keep doing this? Where am I going? Like I said, I feel you. There's a lot of big questions right now, especially since we're on the edge of Pluto's arrival in Aquarius at the end of March. Like I said, another conversation for another time. As we get into later this week, we are starting to get a little bit of a reminder that Mars it's still in Gemini. It's still in Gemini, and it's only at the middle of Gemini right now. But before I get to Mars, speaking of Mars, Venus had gone into Aries, and so Aries on Monday, February 20th, Venus goes into a sign where it has to act like Mars. What do you mean, Katie, act like Mars? Well, one of the major things we need to understand about astrology, it's a little bit of a technical point, but it's an important technical point, is that everything runs on something called rulerships in astrology. The ruler, the boss, the planet that is in charge of Pisces, it's Jupiter. Where's Jupiter right now? So it pulls the energy from Pisces over to Aries. Jupiter's in Aries at the moment. Jupiter is right next to Chiron. So Chiron is a pain point in the sky. So this is why I feel like we're going to be feeling our feels over the next 4 weeks. We got to get into that deeper emotional and psychic material. The things that we are feeling probably have a lot of subtext. It's not really about how it's presenting on a surface level. It's actually about something deeper. We can get into some of our deepest healing with Chiron. But with Chiron, there's both a personal pain and suffering and a collective pain and suffering. And we have to be able to step out of the personal story, of the personal pain and suffering, to connect to how do we take the things that have made us suffer the most and use it like medicine to help other people. And that's where we get into Chiron and Aries. And having the courage and bravery to go after what we want, or to stand up for ourselves, or to go after healing, after all. Then we get into later this week, and it's a lot of the moon is driving a lot of the narrative. And let me go back to Venus for a second. Venus is in the sign that's ruled by Mars, and so Venus is normally very diplomatic. It's like, oh, whatever you want, but not when it's in Aries. It's typically more feisty. It still has that part of it that wants to negotiate, but it wants to negotiate for what it wants. So that's why it sort of doesn't necessarily, it's not a pushover, the Venus in Aries, but it does add a little bit of spark of romance to the week and even the next week or two as Venus is in Aries. As we get through the week, the moon is really driving a lot of the story. We don't have a lot of big aspects. We do have Mercury square Uranus, and this is on the 22nd of February. I'm kind of flagging that one because Mercury, it moves a bit quickly, Mercury at this point, but Mercury plays a big part in Pisces season. It's, talk about rulers, it rules one half of the mutable cross. That's kind of a intermediate point for those that know a little bit more astrology. So it has more status and power in this lunar month, and so it may mean that we might be getting information that surprises us, or information that comes out of nowhere, or something that really opens up our eyes or really forces us to make new decisions. Uranus can sometimes shock us, but I also feel that Uranus is trying to get us to see things differently and maybe get out of our complacency or our ruts, but it might make for a little bit of a shakeup this week. On Thursday, I think it's the 23rd, it's Wednesday, Mercury does pick up a trine to Mars. So conversations might be really pointed or engaging or spicy, for example. But as we go through the rest of the week, we don't have any big aspects. We do get to the first quarter moon this weekend on Sunday. I'm kind of flagging that as well, because when we get to the first quarter moon, we sort of start to see what this new lunar month was about. So that is your look at the astrology of this week. Let's look through each of the 12 zodiac signs. Read for your sun and your rising. Yes, both. It's 2 bits of data that you can synthesize, see things from different perspectives. Anyway, so let's start with Aries. Aries, so just a quick checkup on Mars, your planet. It's still in Gemini. So this continues to be a time for you to really put your focus on writing, speaking, communication, thinking, and learning. It's typically a very curious time for you, perhaps even a little bit of a restless time for you. You've got choices to make. Mars won't clear its retrograde shadow until, I think it's like the middle of March, if I'm remembering correctly. So you got a little bit of time before you start to feel like you're getting some new ground, for example. Mars is in this protracted square to Neptune. So there's this having to reconcile the choices and the actions that you want to make versus knowing that something bigger is required of you. And maybe that's reconciling your human side and your spiritual side, trying to make choices that actually better nourish your soul, for example. Speaking of which, this Pisces new moon is setting the stage. This Pisces new moon that we had on the 20th of February is setting the stage for Saturn's arrival on March 7th. Aries, you're coming to the end of a great personal cycle, one that began, should you be that old, in 1998. And Saturn is going to go into a space that right now the sun is in, and this is a space that's called the 12th. And the 12th is like living in a house your whole life, and then a door appears. Because the 12th represents the world that we can't see. We can't think our way there. We can't even like physically place ourselves there. We have to feel our way into the 12th. And when the 12th is really activated, which it will be this month, and then of course Saturn goes there on March 7th, it is about really looking at the world beyond this world. Whether it's literally getting into more spiritual endeavors, focusing on your these sort of deeper questions around truth and faith and meaning. But the 12th is also a place where we have to divest ourselves of the things that we've been holding on to on mostly a physical level, but even on a spiritual level as well. It's in the 12th that we have to go through our baggage. And so use this Pisces new moon to really do some advanced inventory. What's your spiritual and emotional baggage? What have you been still holding on to for the last 30 years, maybe even longer? But typically the 12th, it's not a busy time. It's a time to rest, to relax, to go within. So use this next 4 weeks to take it easy, to recuperate, not to push too hard, because it's in that quiet, because Aries is like a do, go sign, especially with Mars over in Gemini. So how do you use this time, even if you have to? Sometimes things happen where we have to sit still and reflect and sometimes recuperate. How do you use this time to really start to feel into the emotions or the spaces that typically you haven't been feeling into because you've been too busy? But this is a sort of not advanced, warning is kind of the wrong word I'm looking for, but just sort of this advanced knowledge that you are stepping in a time that's going to require you to get deeper into yourself so you can start to the best that anyone can to answer deep existential questions. Taurus, you are wrapping up I know there's other major transits going on, but you're wrapping up a major transit, and that's Saturn's time in your 10th. And so I'm just turning the spotlight for a moment on your career, because this is a time that this is about you getting very clear about the role that you want to play in the world. It's not to say that it's going to be this neat and tidy. Sometimes it is, but Saturn is coming to the end of this space, and Saturn has been saying to you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And maybe at this point you do know Taurus, or maybe you're still trying to figure out and start to look for where Saturn is giving you feedback. It could be in the form of a promotion, it could be more duties and responsibilities, or it could be where you are being shown a higher bar. You have to, still work to reach this point. And maybe committing to the path that you are on, if not now, over the next couple of weeks. That said, the sun's arrival in Pisces and the Pisces new moon on February 20th is your advance, there's going to be a better word, preview. That's the word I'm looking for, preview. It's advanced preview of Saturn's time in there over the next few years. What is Pisces for you? It's what's called your 11th sign. There are 12 signs in total, and when you get to what's called the 11th, you're starting to get to the end of your personal astrology. The 11th is about community, friendships, social connection, sort of the larger systems and frameworks that run your life, but also the space where we start to look towards the future. Where am I going? What am I headed? Where am I headed? And so Saturn's time, Sun is there right now, you said a Pisces new moon, is giving you this push to renew your connection to your social circle or your community or your friendships, to start to get very clear about who is in your life on a social level. Maybe this is a sense of inventory, Taurus, but also because it is Pisces, Pisces does want to have an impact in the world. It wants to be a force of altruism, for example. So maybe you're preparing for a time when you are taking more action in the world. Maybe you are getting involved in social issues, social causes, sort of these acts of altruism and wanting to help the world to be a better place. That said, Taurus, Venus, your planet, just went into Aries, and then you spend the next few weeks getting very quiet, going within. And this is all in preparation of Venus's arrival in Taurus. I think that's sometime in March, don't quote me. And where you need to rest and not push too hard. So you're sort of straddling, the end of a smaller chapter. You're sort of wrapping up a bigger chapter, but at the same time preparing to make these bigger shifts in your professional life, and especially in advance of Pluto's arrival in Aquarius on March 23rd. Not Cancer, Gemini. Gemini. Gemini, so what do we got? We got Mercury, your planet. It's in Aquarius. And Aquarius for you is the sign that talks about faith and truth and meaning and trying to make more, let's say, external sense of the world, meaning whether it's focusing on your education, traveling, searching, seeking, exploring, looking towards different philosophies, different ways of looking at the world. Mercury is going to move a bit fast. I don't know the date, but eventually it'll get to Pisces. But this is a time for you to really think about these bigger themes in your life, especially as you come off, Pluto is at the 29th degree of Capricorn, which is what's called your 8th. Especially as you start to come out of this major 15-year chapter. Yes, 15-year chapter. I think Mercury is trying to get you to figure out, what did it all show you? What did it all mean? Where are you going? What do you believe in? What do you stand for? That said, it's Pisces season for you, and Pisces season is the season for you to focus on career, your duties and responsibilities in the world, and the direction that you want to take your life in. And this is all in advance of Saturn's arrival on March 7th. And Saturn's time in Pisces from March of 2023 until 2025, 2026 is a major transit for you. A transit is what we call it in astrology. It's a planet transit, particular area of your astrology. Saturn is trying to get you to grow up, trying to get you to build your place in the world. It's trying to get you to answer a very simple question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Maybe you're thinking, Katie, I know exactly what I want to be. Well, Saturn's time in Pisces over the next few years may give you more duties and responsibilities. It may give you a promotion, or it may show you that this part of your life needs a big recalibration. We'll have to see. Every Pisces is different. Not every Gemini is different. So use the sun's time in Pisces and even this Pisces new moon to take notes, because whatever these deeper emotional feelings that you're having, or these sort of questions about your career and direction, I wouldn't bet money, because I'm not a bet money kind of person, but I would almost bet money that these are themes that are going to come back to you again and again over the next few years. Cancer. So I know I say it every week. You're coming to the end of your time in the 8th room. One of my clients messaged me, and she's like, coming to the end of my time in the end of the 8th room. Yes, this has been 3 years of having to do a lot of deep inner emotional work. It has not been easy, and maybe you're very tired, but the role of this time period has been to test you, has been to get you to do the work. And that's the thing about the 8th. It reminds us that a life unexamined or untested never grows. This is hard growth, because it really, having to look at the deepest parts of yourself, the shadow, for example, but this time taught you something, and this is what you bring with you out of the 8th into the 9th. The 9th is the space of wisdom and knowledge. How do we get wisdom and knowledge? We have to go through the 8th. Sometimes we spend a day in the 8th. Sometimes we spend 3 years in the 8th when you have like a major Saturn transit, for example. Now with the sun in the 8th, the sun in the 9th, is to really pay attention to what the sun is illuminating for you, even what this new moon today is illuminating for you, because these deeper themes around faith and truth and meaning will be with you over the next few years. After everything that you've been through, Cancer, in the past few years, what do you still believe in? Do you still believe? And maybe that's the time where you have to really examine your faith. And faith is a word that it sometimes comes hand in hand with religion, but we really have to look at faith as so much more than just a religious faith. Faith is something that comes from deep within first. But faith is in the terms of the 9th, where it's really pulling us out into the world, is that pull to make sense and make meaning, to seek and to explore, to search, whether you get on a plane or you go to an ashram, or whether you go to university or college, or whether you read all the self-help books that you can get the idea in theory. By the time you get to 2025, 2026, you have a clearer idea about what you believe in and what you stand for. So this is all in advance of Saturn's change on March 7th. So a couple weeks from now. Leo, you are starting to wrap up a major transit. The last few years has been teaching you about relationships. And, to be fair, this is going to be different for every Leo, whether it's relationships in general. And this is Saturn loves relationships. We often forget that. And Saturn actually wants us to be in a relationship. I'm not saying that as a romantic relationship. It's just to remind us that human beings need connection, needs relationship. So here Saturn is at the very end of what's called your 7th. What have you learned about relationship? What have you built with relationship? Maybe people have left your life over the past few years, or maybe you started a major relationship, or maybe a series of experiences taught you about the power of connection, relationship. Saturn just wants balance. So if it's to put relationships back into balance, to really know what equity is, and I don't mean transactional equity or financial equity, I mean equity in a relationship between two people. It means there's a natural ebb and flow. Don't have to think about it. Saturn really wants serious relationship in your life in all forms. And so to be aware of the people and the situations that have really marked Saturn's time through the 7th over the past few years. And so to really sit with this, especially over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, because that's the remainder of Saturn's time in the 7th. What are the relationship milestones that have been forged over the past few years? And this has been with Saturn in what's called a square to Uranus. So probably a lot of things in your life, Leo, as they were at the start of 2020, are not as they are here in early 2023. That said, Pisces season, this Pisces new moon, is something called your eighth. And you have to understand that when we set up the eighth. Relationships are just relationships. If there's no emotional intimate, I don't necessarily mean sex, but emotional intimacy is what creates connection between two people, creates trust. It creates a deeper sense of understanding, for example. Otherwise, if it's, let's say, a romantic relationship and there's no intimacy on all levels, just two people living together, just roommates. And so we need the eighth to get us to open up to another person, whether it's emotionally, whether it's sexually, whether it's getting into the things that make us uncomfortable, because it's in that space that we are really transformed. This is the sort of the transformative power of relationship. We don't have to think about the eighth as a space of relationship. The eighth is also a very psychological space. It's a space where we have to face ourselves. We have to be tested by life. And I realize that's not always the material people want to hear, but I have to really do the due diligence to the eighth, because it's through this time that we are truly forged. It's through this time that we truly grow. And growth, it has to be emotional. That's like the key in astrology, is that real growth comes through the element water and emotion and feeling. That said, the eighth will test you over the next few years about a connection around intimacy, around vulnerability. And if you're going into the eighth starting in March, and the Pisces new moon, the Pisces season sort of gives you in advance of this, if there's stuff that you know that's deep inside of you that you have not worked on, really do use the Pisces new moon to sort of set in place some healthy emotional support, because the eighth is going to bring up a lot of stuff in you, especially if it's something that's unhealed. And I'm saying this from personal experience, my own personal experience of my clients, and to have somebody that you feel can sort of safely, shepherd you through the eighth, because it's where we have to face often the dark truths about ourselves, the things that we don't want to admit, and often the things that we project onto other people. So there you go, Leo. Virgo, so we got your planet, it's in Aquarius. This is sort of bringing into a close Saturn's time in Aquarius, which has been about health and wellness, taking care of your physical body, taking care of your physical life, and getting everything organized and sort of rejiggering the systems that run your day-to-day life. That said, Mercury is going to be making something that's called a square to Uranus this week, and to really see what comes out of this time this week, what sort of tensions, what sort of illuminations, what sort of decisions to go in a different way. Uranus is over in your ninth, so it's about the things that you believe in, things you stand for, your truth, your convictions. And so maybe you're having to stand up for what you believe in, or have to figure out, maybe ordering your day-to-day life differently, because now you see things differently. That said, Pisces season for you is giving you an advance of the Saturn's arrival in Pisces on March 7th. So this is a time where it's about really looking at and taking inventory of what is your relationship with relationship. If you are in a serious committed partnership, where are things at? Where are you and your partner at? For example, if you're not in a relationship and maybe you feel a bit isolated, know that astrology just wants us to have connection. We can't live in isolation. So this is Pisces, the Pisces new moon is sort of giving you this preview of a time when new people need to come into your life, new structures need to be built, old structures need to be tended to, things that are out of order or out of balance need to be put back into order and balance, for example. But this is going to be a major change of season for you, Virgo, and I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about over the next weeks and months and beyond. Libra, so your planet Venus is now in Aries. Aries is your relationship sign. I want to highlight this very quickly because Aries is going to be the place of a lot of movement. There's going to be a solar eclipse in Aries on April 20th and a lunar eclipse, going into October. There's going to be a solar eclipse in Libra, your sign. So you're coming into 2023 and 2024. There's going to be a lot of dynamic activity in your life. It could be a turning point. It could be a time of new relationships or a time where relationships are very highlighted in your life. That said, Pisces season for you is about health and wellness, taking care of your physical body, making sure your physical human life is in order, tip-top shape. I'm saying you want things to be in tip-top shape because Saturn is going to arrive in this space on March 7th. So just 2 weeks from now. Almost. And with Saturn going to this space, and I'm just putting on my traditional astrologer hat for a moment, you want to make sure that if you are not taking care of your body, if you're not taking care of your health, that you are at least taking some proactive measures. I'm not a doctor, of course, because Saturn going into this space really wants your physical being to run in the best possible way, and it will show you when that is not in balance. It's just something that I've seen over and over again. Positive, healthy ways in which Saturn can go through this space is really making lasting changes in how you take care of your body, health and wellness and diet, really getting into your body, for example. But that said, Pisces season for you is a time to really sort of clean things up and to get things organized. Scorpio, so Mars is your planet. It's still in your 8th, but we got one more month until Mars finally leaves the 8th and it goes into Cancer. It's just been this very deep emotional time. At least Mars is direct. It's been direct since January 12th. That said, Saturn is wrapping up its time in something called your 4th, and to the best that anybody can define at this moment, Saturn has been asking you since 2020, where's home and who is home? This has been such a major foundational time in your life, one that spotlighted family, home, your living situation, your household, starting a household, people moving in, people moving out. But this has been about putting down roots in your life. And that, of course, means different things to different Scorpios, different things at different stages of life, especially if you're younger versus older. That said, Pisces season for you is giving you a little bit of an advanced preview of Saturn's arrival on March 7th, where the major story arc is now going to be about taking yourself and taking your talents seriously. And this is a season where, this is 3 years, about really discovering exactly who you are. If you are creative already, your creativity needs to sort of start to produce something. If you're like, nope, I'm not creative, Katie, I assure you there is something that you can do. We all have something that we can make, we can do, a talent, even if it's small. But over the next few years, you're going to have to take yourself and take your talent seriously. We need to make sure that we have space for fun and passion. And it sounds like a luxury, especially in a culture or world we have to work very hard. But if we are working very hard and we lose something of ourselves, we don't get have a chance to really connect to that passion, that fire, we get burnt out. So if you are burnt out, Scorpio, the next few years, you have to put things back into order. That's just how Saturn works. Sagittarius. So you're coming up to the start of a major chapter in your life. Saturn's arrival in your 4th home and family roots and foundation the next few years is about putting down roots, creating a household, making major moves, needing to focus on family or focus on your parents if they're still alive, needing to really take on more responsibility in the home. The sun's arrival in Pisces and then the Pisces new moon today, the 20th, really sets the stage for this next big chapter of your life. It is worthwhile to pay attention to some of the themes, the stories, the feelings that are starting to pop up around home and family. But this is going to be a major shift in the astrological weather. It's like a new season for Sagittarius. And to be fair, maybe the sun and even Saturn's time in Pisces is connecting to the seeds that Jupiter planted, Jupiter planted while Jupiter was in Pisces in 2021 and 2022. Speaking of Jupiter, your planet, it's in the 5th, and it's going to be in the 5th until the middle of May. And this continues to be a time for you to really get into what makes you you. What is the spark that lives within? What is your identity? What are your creative talents, gifts, and abilities? We all have creative talents, gifts, and abilities. But it's really, like I said, it's the start of a major chapter of your life. I will say this week, Mercury, which is a major planet in your astrology, does make a square to Uranus. So see where are the things that are coming out of left field or out of the blue, or what is sort of shaking things up, or what is a sort of opening your eyes and communicating and speaking in a different way. Capricorn, you are starting to wrap up a major chapter. I know that we've been talking about this week in and week out, and as you get to the last 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks of Saturn in Capricorn, Saturn is saying to you, your planet, do you know what you're worth? How has your relationship with the material plane, material stability and security shifted over the past few years? How have you built material stability and security? What assets do you own? Do you own property, for example? Or are you yearning for that because it's something maybe that's out of financial reach? Saturn has really tried to push you hard over the past few years. This is different for different Capricorns, but you've needed to sort of get on top of finances, money, spending, really create a sense of material stability and security again. That said, that's all going to start to shift on the 7th of March, and the sun's arrival in Pisces is giving you the preview. And so the sun in Pisces is about voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn, and needing to really focus on education over the next few years. Saturn's time there over the next 3 years is really trying to get you to take your voice and to take education and to take learning seriously. More things that we have to talk about later, but it's a big shift, and one where typically you have to rely more on your intuition. But that said, this is really getting into deeper emotional feelings, especially with Jupiter in Aries, and so really pay attention to the deeper pain points that are coming up for this week for you, Capricorn. Aquarius. I had a lot of Aquarius clients, Aquarius rising clients recently, and it's something that I've said before, and I'll say it again. It's been a little bit difficult for Aquarius. I think Aquarius has been having a really hard go, like Scorpio, because the pressure points are hitting emotional points. They're not hitting things outside of you. They're hitting the things that you really feel. But that said, with Saturn coming to the end of Aquarius, not to return for another 30 years, yes, 30 years, this is about Aquarius, or whomever is listening who's an Aquarius, about you've had to really individuate yourself to stand on your own 2 feet. And I think that's been hard for Aquarius because there hasn't been any help. It's like you've had to do it all alone. It's really felt like a lot of heavy weight on your shoulders, for example, and that's where the big shifts in your home environment with family, your living situation, that's been happening over the last few years with Uranus. That said, Pisces season gives you a preview of the next few years. Pisces is your money sign, money, material stability, material security. Because Pisces is a money sign for you, I tell people, when Pisces or Neptune, although you do have Neptune there right now, it's like when that's part of your money story, I say, I don't care if they pay you $1 million. First, it has to feed your soul. And so this is a time for Aquarius to make sure that how they earn a living, the structure of their sort of material life, it is aligned with their deeper emotional and spiritual values. And that's going to, of course, mean different things to different Aquariuses. But it's going to be a big shift on March 7th, and one that you will feel very differently because Pisces is a water sign. So it's going to really focus on the water, on the emotional and spiritual side of life over the next few years. Finally, Pisces, my belle of the ball. Pisces new moon. If it's your birthday today, of course, happy birthday. If your birthday is, beginning of Pisces, plus or minus, it's a new beginning for you. It's a very powerful, new moon, and this is a sense of renewal, new beginnings that are going to take you out through the year, for example. That said, this is a time for new beginnings. The sun is now in something called your first, and this Pisces new moon really sit with its energies. Like, what do you want to create? What new chapters do you want to embark on? And all of this is in advance of Saturn's arrival in Pisces on March 7th. And you're sort of at the end of that 30-year chapter, or even the last 3 years, where you've had to really divest yourself of things from the past and let things go. So you're in this sort of liminal in between. Like on one hand, you can sense that something new is happening. On the other, you feel like something is coming to an end. Pisces, Saturn's arrival on March 7th is the start of a major 30-year chapter. So I would use this Pisces new moon to really like think and plan, like what are the new duties and responsibilities that I want to take on? How do I want to go off in a new chapter? But it's we're gonna have lots more to talk about as we get to into the next couple of weeks. So don't worry, Pisces. We'll still continue to have lots to talk about. Anyway, there you go. That is your look at the astrology this week. Follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. Check out my Saturn and Pisces webinar. It's always lovely to see you all every week. So until next week, take care and be well. Bye-bye.